convinced. I left a note on the door after work that day, saying if you're looking for Michelle, she does not live here. She only rents this house out. If you continue to come here, I will be reporting this to the police. Doing this gave me a level of comfort, actually. I thought this would end things. That night, every waking minute was spent with anxiety, worrying about hearing knocks at the door again. To my relief, there were none tonight. I went to sleep in relative peace, thinking my note worked. The next morning, I opened the door and removed my note from the glass, but then realized it wasn't my note. It was a new note, and it said, "I'm not looking for Michelle, I'm looking for you." And then it said my name, followed with, "I like watching you," like it said in the previous note. I sent it to my dad right away. I felt seriously ill. My dad packed a bag and drove up first thing. He was at my house by the time I got home from work. And work that day was rough because I couldn't think of anything except for this horrific situation. I even wondered if someone in my office could have been doing this, like this creepy guy Fernando. My dad and I waited to call the police together until later in the night when we figured whoever was doing this may be hiding out there already. We wanted them to see the police presence. We spoke with an officer outside. My dad said it must have been a busy night since they only sent one. My dad, being a retired police officer, obviously didn't hurt in this whole situation. After the officer left with his report, my dad stayed out on the front stoop for hours, even after I went to sleep. Obviously, the person didn't return that night, and I moved out once I was able to pack all my things. Michelle was completely understanding. Thankfully, whoever was stalking me at that house didn't follow me to my new place, likely eliminating the possibility that it was a coworker. So I will likely never... My dad stayed out on the front stoop. I'll be honest with you, I've probably spent more time chasing women than I'd like to admit. I've had to tone it down a lot since college, partly because of what I'm about to tell you. I went to school in California, and while I haven't been back in a while, when I was there, the culture was very open. And when I say open, I mean sexual. This honestly could have been true for other colleges in other states at the time, but I really wouldn't know. It was my sophomore year, and I had just finished pledging the fraternity Pike. About halfway through the semester, though, I was getting sick of only talking to sorority girls that seemed to know half the guys in every frat. It was honestly a little gross, and I started developing a fear that every girl I was interested in had been with several people I personally knew. I tried my luck and created a Tinder profile. It wasn't long before I matched with someone whose interests seemed to match mine. We started talking, and things were going well. After a few days, we made plans to meet up at a local college bar called Tap House on a Saturday night. This was actually my favorite bar in the area because it had pool tables, and I had been clearing racks since I was 10 years old. I remember getting there a little early so I could secure a table and warm my muscles up a bit. An hour passed, though, and I came to terms with the fact that I had probably been stood up. I was trying to decide whether I should salvage the night or just go home and play online chess when I got a notification. To my surprise, it was Yamel, the girl I was waiting on, telling me she had just arrived. I greeted her, and she apologized for being late. We got some drinks, played some pool, and got to know each other. She was Latina and a heavy drinker, so I got plastered just trying to keep up. At one point, she asked for my Instagram, which I gave to her. 10 seconds later, I found myself staring at a collection of explicit photos she had just sent me. I was confused, but in my drunken state, I wasn't going to complain. Before I could even respond, she told me, "Your turn," which I figured could only mean one thing. Honestly, if I hadn't been so drunk, I probably would have questioned why we were sending pictures to each other when we were literally 5 feet apart, but I didn't have the foresight. I complied with her request. We laughed about the whole thing, and that was that. A few hours later, things at the bar were starting to wind down. I was planning on inviting her to my place, but she beat me to it, asking if I could spend the night at hers. I agreed, and we left the bar. I couldn't even walk in a straight line. It was honestly embarrassing. We Ubered to her apartment, which was actually in Oakland, something I hadn't realized before. Honestly, red flags should have been going off in my brain the moment we crossed into Oakland. She unlocked the door of her apartment and stepped aside so I could go first. I took a few steps inside and heard the door shut behind me. It was pitch black in there. As I was turning around to ask her to flip some lights on, the The room lit up. To my horror, I wasn't facing a harmless 5'2" girl anymore. Instead, two massive bald dudes with tank tops were standing in front of the door with their hands clasped. I turned around, and there was another white bald dude in front of me. I wish I could tell you more about the room I was in, but it was honestly difficult for me to recall small details of that night. I couldn't fight or flee, so I just froze. The guy in front of me began telling me my own name, birthday, and age. He then went on to say that the girl I had just gone out with was 17, meaning I had received and sent explicit pictures to a minor. He then suggested that I do what I was told, which I did. The two guys behind me confiscated my phone, wallet, and keys, all of which I gave up without a fight. I asked the guy in front of me what he wanted, and he basically told me that he was a major distributor of illicit substances in Northern California. He told me that I'd be outed as a pedophile if I didn't distribute his product to my fraternity and university. I wish I could remember more specifics. The two men behind me then gave me a piece of paper and told me to write down my address, followed by a list of names and numbers for as many students as I knew. I told them that I'd need my phone to complete the list, so one of them held it firmly in front of me and let me scroll through. All three of them were hovering over me now, knowing I was basically checkmated. I don't know what compelled me to do it, but the literal second I saw a chance, I ran. I was too drunk to think about the consequences of those pictures on my phone. I narrowly escaped out the door I had entered from and ran as fast as I possibly could. It's not like I was safe, though. I was still smack dab in one of the most dangerous places in America. Eventually, I found a nice-looking house and begged them to open up. I pleaded with them to let me use their phone and call 911, and then I told the police everything. But of course, I didn't remember the address of that girl's apartment. An officer picked me up and took down a report before asking me if I would be okay leading them back to that apartment. I was actually able to retrace the way I had run, and I waited in one of the squad cars as the police barged in. After a few minutes, an officer told me that the place was completely deserted, and there were not any signs that people had even been there. In the following weeks, the police actually took my report seriously and launched a full-scale investigation. They concluded that it was probably gang-related, but were never able to arrest anyone. That was years ago. I bet this incident has been swept under the rug of Oakland's rampant crime and drug-related activity. In all honesty, what happened to me all those years ago is probably nowhere near the top of the list when it comes to that godforsaken place. I haven't used a dating app since. I've been smoking cigarettes every day for years. Before you judge me, let me just say that I recently started seeing a therapist for my nicotine addiction. Unfortunately, it hasn't helped much. The only thing worse than my nicotine addiction is my sleep schedule. I don't know what it is. I find myself staying up hours past midnight and rarely get out of bed before noon. While I'm trying to fix these parts of my life, they're extremely relevant to what I'm about to tell you. It began a few months ago. I was standing on my balcony, like I do most nights, smoking a cigarette. I live in a really secluded neighborhood. It's not like the houses around here are right next to each other. Despite this, I have a neighbor whose fence I can see over if I'm standing on my balcony. I'm not nosy or anything, but this particular night, I was looking into his yard. I had never met the guy, but I assumed he lived alone since there was only ever a navy blue BMW parked in his driveway. But not this night, though. There was a black van I'd never seen before sitting in front of his house. I didn't make anything of it, just noting the coincidence to myself. The next night, though, I made it a point to pay attention to his yard, and the same black van was parked there again. I didn't assume something sinister was going on. I was more intrigued than anything. The following morning, I went up to my balcony and looked into his yard. The van was gone. For the remainder of the week, I made a game out of observing the van at night, theorizing its purpose. I said I wasn't nosy, but I sure am obsessive. It's actually the main reason most of my friends drifted out of my life. I wasn't going to do more than observe, though. It wasn't my business or place to poke around further. That is, until one night, when I saw something that completely changed my perspective of the situation. I was up later than usual. It was maybe 5 in the morning. The van was there, as it had been the past several nights. I was smoking my last cigarette when my neighbor actually walked outside, something I hadn't seen yet. I watched as he made his way to the van, carrying what appeared to be a long black bag. It almost looked like a set of golf clubs, only much heavier. After opening the van's sliding door, he delicately placed the bag inside. He promptly got in the driver's seat and sped off. I was dumbfounded. I had absolutely no idea what he could have been carrying. I was exhausted though, so I figured I'd think about it more the next morning. The next day, I decided that I'd go out on my balcony a little earlier and wait for the van to arrive at his house. I brought my laptop up there so I could get some work done and wait. It was around 10 p.m. The van wasn't in the driveway, but around 1 a.m. the van pulled in. I quickly shut my laptop and watched. Nothing happened for a good several minutes, like the van just sat there, engine running and all. After about 5 minutes, the driver door opened and there he was. I watched as he went around to the side of the van, then slid the door open and pulled out the same bag that he had put in the night before. He seemed to be struggling this time around, visibly trying not to crack under the weight of whatever was in there. After waddling a few slow steps, both he and the bag disappeared into his house. I didn't know what to think. I thought about waiting there until 5 a.m. again, but that would be far too taxing on my brain. Something was definitely wrong though, and I was determined to find out what. The next morning, I flipped a coin and ultimately decided to follow his van when he pulled out that night. After a pretty unproductive day, I went up to my balcony around 4 a.m. and waited, cigarette in hand. As soon as I saw movement in his driveway, I rushed downstairs, grabbed my keys, and got in my car. I turned my headlights off and waited for the van to turn onto the main road. Once it did, I began tailing it. After 20 minutes of driving, he pulled onto a dirt path that looked like it led into the woods. It did. I followed, and the woods actually started thinning up a bit. It seemed like this path had once been a main road or something. We drove for another few minutes before I realized what his destination was. There was a deserted gas station literally tucked away in some clearing in the woods, and right in front of it was the BMW I'd always seen parked in his driveway. I feared I was getting too close, so I turned my car around and parked across the street from the dirt road. I must have waited there an hour. His BMW finally pulled out of the clearing. Nervously, I started driving back up the path, not sure what I'd find. I pulled over on the side of the road and started walking towards the gas station. It was eerie. The front door was locked. I walked around to the side. That was locked as well. So was the back door. I needed to know what was inside. There was a row of windows that I tried to open, but none of them would budge. Against my better judgment, I picked up a rock and slammed it into one of the windows. It shattered pretty easily, but there must have been a security system in that place because alarm bells started blaring. I sprinted back to my car, the whole time wondering why an abandoned gas station would be rigged with an alarm system. As I sped out of there, I called 911 and gave them a vague description before hanging up. I got back to my house and ran inside, my heart still racing. The next morning, I woke up hoping the whole thing had blown over. Boy, was I wrong. I went up to my balcony to see like 8 police cars in my neighbor's driveway, lights flashing and everything. I watched as an officer escorted my neighbor out of his house in handcuffs. One by one, the police cars drove away and I was left to my imagination. I lit a cigarette and stood there, finally alone with my thoughts. I've asked the police for details on several occasions, but they would never answer my questions. I've even tried driving back up to that gas station, but the whole road had been blocked off. Maybe one day I'll work up the courage to walk through the woods and go looking for answers. I'm not somebody who grew up with any kind of sleep disorders, such as sleep paralysis or night terrors. I've always been a very heavy sleeper, so that's why when what I'm about to tell you started happening, it was a shock to me. We all have the occasional nightmare. I used to call nightmares a free, 3D immersive horror movie. To most, that will probably sound freakish, but in a weird way, I sometimes like the thrill of waking up after a nightmare. I was living with my one roommate, Patricia. I just called her Trish. We had very different schedules with work, so we didn't see each other much besides on the weekends. This happened in July. I remember because it was so hot out that I had the window AC unit on full blast every night, which also provided a white noise that helped me sleep better. It was the first night that I had the nightmare, a few days after my ex and I had broken up, and life wasn't exactly the best. I had a dream that I vaguely remember for the most part, but the part that I vividly remember is being in a room full of my family members sitting quietly around a dinner table, and standing across the table from me was what I could best describe to be a creature that looked like one of the aliens from the movie Science, only with horns and claws. It looked like what you'd imagine a sleep paralysis demon to look like, only I was still fully asleep and dreaming. The next thing I knew, the thing was standing next to me, looking down at me. I started to run away in my dream until I was in my room, or I guess my brain's version of my room. That was the last of that dream I remember before waking up. My room was pitch black, and the AC fan was on full blast. My heart was racing a bit from the dream, and I sat there thinking, wow, that was a creepy dream. I looked around the room naturally before laying back down and going to sleep. The following night, I woke up in the middle of the night to my bedroom door open, which I usually 99% of the time would leave shut unless I was drinking. My immediate thought was that it was Trish checking if I was home. I went up to go shut it and went back to sleep fairly quickly. I asked Trish if she came in my room the next day via text, and she told me she did not. So it was always possible I just took a midnight trip to the bathroom or kitchen that I didn't remember. It was the following night that I had another nightmare. That same demon creature from my previous dream appeared again in this one. This one was a lot more disturbing. Instead of being with my family, I was in a dark, square, empty room with the thing, and it kept getting closer to me. Oddly, I don't remember the thing actually moving its limbs to walk. I just remember that it kept getting closer and closer until it was on top of me. And then, like I couldn't even move, the thing took a claw to my thigh and scratched me, and I actually think I felt the pain in my dream. Then, the next thing I remember is waking up. I don't mean I woke up right after that. I mean I don't remember what happened after that in the dream. But it was dark in the room once again, AC on full blast. I felt a slight stinging feeling on my upper thigh,